Thank you so much, Garrett, for the introduction. I'm Lisa Jamhoury, and I'm a SloMoCo micro-resident for the spring semester. I'm super excited to be part of the group working on my project called You, Me, and Our Computers. So this is a project that is all about the space that we inhabit online, or the digital space that we share together online. And I think the person who best described this space, or sort of got at what I've been thinking about with this project, is Myrin Krueger in his sort of seminal book from the 1990s called Artificial Reality. And in the book, he's talking about the early work that he was doing with Video Place and with some of his other pieces at that time, where he was essentially doing telematic embodied video work. And he talks about the fact that telecommunication is sort of traditionally thought of as two spaces that are connected, where essentially it's these two physical locations, and the point of telecommunication is to sort of put a tunnel in between them, and they're bringing information from one space to the other space, and then back to the other space. But what he says is that while he was working in this area, he started to realize that two-way telecommunication between two places actually creates a third distinct place, which consists of the information that is available to both communicating parties simultaneously. So essentially what he was saying is two-way telecommunication isn't just about representing the spaces that two people are in, but it's about thinking about what is available to those two people and thinking about what can happen in that space. And so that's the space that I'm really interested in. So today we spend a lot of time in this space, this third space, and we spend a lot of it in Zoom or in video calls, where essentially we have representations of our two physical spaces. And I think we spend most of our time in what I would say is that sort of original paradigm, which Krueger explains, which is, even here where we're able to see two videos side by side, they're still just representations of the two separate spaces. And so we're just taking sort of what's available to each individual party and sharing it back and forth, but we're not really, in this experience, it's not taking advantage of, what can happen in this shared digital space, or what's available to both of these parties actually, and sort of, what are creative ways that we can combine them or consider this space in new ways. How is this space a shared third space, and how is this space distinct from those two original spaces that the people are physically inhabiting? So that's what I'm thinking through in this project. So the project is called You, Me, and Our Computers, and it's a series of what I call sketch websites exploring social embodied interaction over distance. And I say sketch because the idea of this project is not to have a really high-end output, at least at this point, but the idea is just to kind of do quick and dirty sketches and get some ideas out quickly, and to play test them with people, and just to see what works and what doesn't in the space, and to kind of get the ideas flowing. So the project uses computer vision, open source machine learning algorithms, and peer-to-peer networking to experiment with shared digital canvases, like HTML5 canvases on websites. And it explores virtual touch and co-presence over distance. And then the ultimate goal of this project, at least this part of the project, is to make web-based social embodied interaction more accessible. And I'll talk a little bit more about what I'm doing for that at the end of the presentation. So my goal for the micro-residency is to complete 10 sketches. And so far I've completed 5, which I'll just discuss all of them today. So the first one is actually, I call it sort of the prologue to the project. It's called Me, Me, and My Computer. And so if you've been following SloMoCo or aware of the micro-residency, you'll know that at the beginning of the micro-residency, we had an opportunity to submit work to a show called Design Space, which was essentially a large-scale exhibition, audiovisual exhibition in a parking garage. And it was really interesting when I heard about the opportunity, because to me, it felt actually like the opposite of what I was working on. It was, asynchronous, very large scale, hi-fi audiovisual content. And I was working on this sort of lo-fi, real-time, HTML5 canvas, webcam work, but it ended up being a really nice project for me because I was just getting up and running with sort of the underpinnings of the project, getting the things I needed, sort of the bones of the project, which were HTML5 canvases, and getting the algorithms up and running that I needed to do and everything. And so it allowed me to create this piece, which I'll just run as I talk, which it's me and my computer. And essentially what I was building is a canvas where two people could be present, but I was just testing it with myself at this point. So the two people in this experience are both me. And what's happening here is I'm using PostNet, which is an open source pose detection algorithm available from Google and TensorFlow.js. I'm using that and it works in real time in the browser just off of a webcam. So you're seeing here two webcam images of myself. We're sharing a canvas. And I'm using the pose detection to outline both of my bodies. And then when we come close, which you can see here and what's rolling on screen, the shapes are combined. So the algorithm essentially, when the users touch, they come together. And so for the Design Space exhibition, I just took this and I ran a video of this work like 7 times across the screen so that it could fit the projection length and staggered the playtime. So then the next sketch that I've worked on during this period is sketch 1, contours, which essentially is exactly what you just saw, but it's with two people. So it's two people on a shared canvas, but this time I play tested this with Nantini, who is also a MICO resident this semester. And she was in New York City, I'm in Vermont. So, we had some hours between us. And essentially how this works is we have our two webcams side by side, and we have PoseNet running on both of our bodies as we're getting real-time pose detection. And then we have our webcam side by side, but then you can see here where the dotted lines are, we actually have some overlapping space where both of our webcams are. So I'm going to run some video of the play test so you can sort of see how this works. So when we come to the middle, our shapes come together, then you can see none can sort of walk in and behind my space, and sort of breaks sometimes if you go too far into the other space, but you can see none is able to sort of walk in and out of my space. I'm able to do the same with her, and then in the middle we can sort of play together. So an interesting thing about this is the very first time I tested this, the canvases were almost entirely overlapped and we were way too close. So then I tested this again where we just had the center spot of overlapping. And Nun commented that she wanted more space for us to overlap. And I definitely agreed. It felt like we really wanted to play together, but we only had this small space. And so, if I were to continue with this sketch, I have found that we need to have our own space, but it would be nice to kind of find that sort of Goldilocks spot between our own space and our together space. So this experience also we had the ability to just turn off our webcams. So we tested this also. This is me and Nun and I. So we tested without our webcams, and what was really interesting, Nun commented, and I absolutely agreed, that the moment we turned our webcams off, it was a much more playful experience. We felt much more free. We were just kind of able to move around and play with each other without really thinking about what was ours, what's mine, what is yours, whatever. It's just like the experience really became much more free. And one other comment that Nun had about when she tested with me was that the experience in general just really made you want to mirror the other person, like having this side by side and the way the shapes were working. It just like you really wanted to have this sort of mirror interaction. So then the next sketch in this series is called Overlap, and I tested this with Renee Carmichael, who's also a MICO resident. And she is in Argentina and I'm in the US. So again, we tested over quite a big distance with no visible latency on either end. And so the way that this works is it's quite similar to the two that you've just seen, but what's happening is, so you're seeing my view of the experience, So both of the webcams are directly overlapped on top of each other. And, but I just see Renee's webcam. My webcam is invisible, and I just see the PoseNet outline of my own body. So I'm going to roll some video from this playtest as well. Let's see. There we go. So you can see I'm seeing Renee moving around in her space, and then that's my outline kind of playing back. And again, Renee commented, just like Nun had, that this experience and having these shapes really made her want to mirror and sort of, just kind of mirror each other. And I certainly agreed as I was in this experience. Renee also said that she found perspective and size to be a really big part of this particular sketch, that she wanted to, on her end, she sort of wanted to move forward and back to be able to line up the size of our bodies, that it just kind of kept being a thing where she was like, oh, are we supposed to be the same size? We're not the right size. And so she was really working through that the entire time we tested. I think that something that I found really interesting about this particular experience was, as I was reviewing the footage of this, it occurred to me for the first time that Renee was watching me the whole time. And I all of a sudden became very self-aware and was like, oh gosh, I need to worry about what I look like. Of course it was in the past, but it was a really interesting thing that when I was in this experience with Renee, I wasn't self-conscious at all because I wasn't seeing myself. I was just seeing Renee, and I was interacting with her. But then realizing that she was seeing me, in the past, it like really sort of was like, oh gosh, did I look okay? Was I, all of the things that come with realizing your image was being broadcasted. And it really got me thinking, in addition to, because Nun had the same comment that when we turned off the webcams and just had our visual representations, that she had, sorry, I'll just go back here for a second. Nun had the same experience, that once we turned off the webcams, it was much more free. And so I've been thinking about this a little bit, and how in many ways that reflects what our experience is like in physical space, in the sense that we don't often actually see our own images when we're in physical space. We have to be quite intentional to see our own images. We go look at a mirror or we do something else. And in those moments, we are quite hyper self-aware. Whereas when we're on the computer and communicating with other people, we're almost always confronted with our own image. And I've been thinking that this could have a lot to do with why it's just so exhausting to communicate with people online all the time, because we are sort of constantly, we're trying to be hyper aware of what other people are saying, but then we're also hyper aware of ourselves and our own images. So it's something that I'm certainly taking into account, as I make my future sketches. How can I help people get past that hyper awareness? How can I use it either for, either make people hyper aware on purpose or not, but it's certainly a factor to keep in mind as I continue to make sketches in this space. So the next sketch in this series is called Frame Difference. So again, I tested this with Renee, again in Argentina, and this again has two overlapped webcams, but I'm using frame difference to only show the pixels that have changed. So essentially frame differencing looks at the webcam image from the last frame and looks at the webcam image from the current moment, and looks and finds only the pixels that have changed. So wherever there is a pixel shift, essentially that's where you're seeing movement. So it's kind of a cheap way to get movement detection. So I'm using that for both of our bodies, and then also using PoseNet to look at the distance between essentially the sternum. So the closer that we get, the more you can see us, and the farther apart we get, the more we fade. So I'm just going to roll some video from that while I talk. So again, so the closer that we get, the closer that we get, the more you can see us, and the farther apart we get, the more we fade. And then also, the more we move, the more you see. The less we move, the less you see, right? Because there's less pixel changing. One interesting thing that happened in this experience was Oh, and so you can see now we've gone apart from each other and we've stopped moving. So it just, the whole sketch just kind of goes quiet. And that was something that Renee commented on, that she really liked it because it added a nice timing to the experience, where it was sort of, it sort of just encouraged you to also take a breath and then begin, you know, there were like sets in the movement, which was very nice. So there was a mirroring bug actually in this, when essentially when I wrote the code, I wrote it so that when I move left, the image moves right by mistake. It wasn't properly mirrored. And Renee commented that she didn't know if it was a bug or not, and that it made the experience a little bit more ethereal and interesting. But it wasn't supposed to be like that. And I plan on fixing it and retesting it, because I think what was interesting for me is I felt that it was, effectively, it meant whenever I was trying to give Renee space, I was bumping into her and crowding her. And I think that it would be really nice to test it, you know, with the proper mirroring. Renee commented also that this experience, as opposed to the earlier experiences with the contour lines, really made her move much more naturally. Whereas in the earlier experiences that I showed, she said that she felt that she could feel the medium in between us. She could really feel the computer's presence, that it was, you know, it really was us and the computer sort of moving together. Whereas in this experience, she just felt very much in her body, and she could move, you know, very naturally and freely. And then there was a really interesting thing, again, that I noticed in reviewing the footage sort of after the fact. So when I created this sketch, my thought was, okay, this sketch encourages you to move and to be close to the other person, right? So that's how you can actually see your imagery. So my thought in creating it was that it would encourage some interesting sort of moments of intimacy, of sort of touching each other and just trying to understand each other's sort of presence in the space. And interestingly, when I reviewed the footage, there were these sort of seemingly intimate moments. If you notice the cover image for this presentation, there's an image where it almost looks like I'm holding Renee by the waist, and we're in this very like seemingly intimate position. But I did not feel that intimacy at all in user testing it. I felt very present and sort of like we were dancing and having fun together, but it didn't feel like a super intimate experience. I haven't asked Renee about this, and I'd be curious how she felt. But I think that in sort of thinking back on it, the fact that you have to continue moving in this experience, and the fact that your image is fading all the time, it doesn't leave time for reflection. It actually encourages presence, but it doesn't encourage that sort of trying to understand what's going on there, or trying to understand your relationship to the other person. It just sort of keeps you going, and I wouldn't say it's a very like pensive experience. It just really encourages movement. Great, and so then the last experience or sketch that I've created so far is called Face Mosh, and it's using the Google Media Pipe face mesh algorithm, which just detects the face, and so you can essentially you can separate the face out of the webcam. And the way that this works is that it takes both images of the face and it aligns them by the center point between the eyes. And then in order to view your own face, you move your face all the way to the left. If you want to view your partner's face, you move all the way to the right. And if you keep your face in the middle, then you see a 50-50 blend of both faces. So I'll run some video of this real quick. And so I tried to test this experience with Renee, but unfortunately there were a number of bugs, which I just don't have the time to talk about today, but I'm happy to answer questions about them, or they're also on my manifold if you want to read about them. So I'm just testing this with my partner over our local connection. But this was just a really interesting experience. I think I found it to be way more fun than I expected. And I think, you know, I had originally planned on just working with the body for these experiences. But when I saw this algorithm, I thought, oh, hey, why not? I'll play with the face a little bit. And I think, you know, for better or for worse, we are all very connected to our faces. So using it as an interaction mechanism was actually really interesting. and sort of novel. And then also just being able to sort of mix and play with the face was really fun. So I think that there's a lot of experimentation that I still have to do in this space, and it's been fun so far. So that's everything I've created so far. In the remainder of the micro residency, I'm going to create 5 more of these sketches. And then at the end of creating these 10 sketches, I plan to clean up and open source the underlying code and examples. And then I'm actually teaching a course about this fall. It's called The Body Everywhere in Here. I'll be teaching at New York University at the Interactive Telecommunications program. So I'll be taking a lot of what I've learned and integrating it into my syllabus. If you'd like to continue following the process, it's on Manifold plug. And I'll also be posting periodically on my social media, everywhere I'm Lisa Jamhoury. So thank you very much.